Welcome to Brazil Bound, presented by Castrol GTX High Mileage, with former U.S. men's national team assistant coach Jesse Marsch and MLSsoccer.com editor-in-chief Greg Lalas. I'm your host, Jason Saghini. Jurgen Klinsmann and U.S. Soccer have named the 30-man preliminary camp roster for the 2014 World Cup, and as with any roster announcement, you have surprises on both sides of the aisle. And we'll start with the biggest surprises left off, perhaps, as evidenced by the term "No Eddie Johnson" trending on Twitter. Jesse, EJ being left off this roster has to be the biggest story of the day.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but it's one that's understandable, and frankly, it's one that I support. And it's mostly because Eddie Johnson has not been in form lately, so it's a decision that I think is 100% based on form. I was even privileged to be at the game against the Philadelphia Union, DC United, and Eddie just wasn't sharp. He wasn't running, he wasn't competing, and he didn't look into the game. So that's my biggest concern, is even after the game, I thought to myself, that doesn't look like a player that's prepared and ready to go to the World Cup. And again, when you compare it with the guys that he's competing against, a lot of whom are in form, that's where I think now the decision comes down to.
You don't think, though, that a guy like Eddie Johnson you could put on at the end of the game to maybe go and get a goal on a set piece or something like that?
Yes, I do think that, but based on what he looks like now, I would have major concerns about him making any plays. Okay, and maybe you could take a gamble and put him on the 30-man roster and see what he looks like. But again, I think there are other guys in that list that now have deserved to be there.
No, certainly, man. Johansson had a very good season. Terrence Boyd finished up his season in Austria very well. And Wondolowski has shown that he can be effective, certainly at the national team of late. I think another player missing, though, is Juan Agudelo. He did very well, I thought, in Europe with Utrecht and finished up the season strong. And he has some of the attributes you want in a big game. He's unafraid. He is big and strong. He's not afraid to take on a defender. He can make space for himself. And to me, he was a guy at least deserves a look in the camp to come in.
I would agree with that, but I think ultimately Eddie was competing with Chris Wondolowski. And I think that even though Chris hasn't been in great form, when you watch him in games, he's putting a lot into it. He cares so much. It's like every chance he takes, he feels like this is the chance to show Jurgen Klinsmann that I'm ready to play.
And he's certainly a great locker room guy.
He is, and in the end, he can make plays. He's shown that. He's shown that over time, that no matter what level he plays at, maybe in the run of play it's not perfect, but he's around the goal and he scores goals.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't have the physical tools of an Eddie Johnson, but he does well. And speaking of physical tools, another guy that we thought was going to be on this roster and didn't make it was Brek Shea. And look, it's the same thing. When you look at form, Brek Shea was certainly not in form, but we did think he had a little something that could help this roster.
Yeah, and he does. We know, we've seen it before, but obviously he hasn't shown it of late. I mean, he hasn't really gotten much playing time in the last 6 months at all. And I think that guys like Brad Davis have proven that they are capable of doing something for this team, especially with Brad Davis. He can play a set piece in like nobody else on this team can. And I think that's what got him on this roster.
Despite Brek Shea's inconsistency, he's still one player that I think at the highest level can make a play. And if he has a chance to go at a guy, I think he can get by him. He can serve then multiple balls in different styles. He can drive it. He can float it. So he's still a guy that even at the highest level, you can put it at the end of the game and he might pull something off.
But arguably what you said about Eddie Johnson also applies in some ways to Brek Shea.
When you look at the guys who surprised us by being left off, that means there are guys who surprised us by getting on. And one name that stuck out to me was Joe Corona. We didn't talk a ton about him. He doesn't stand out as a flashy player. Jesse, what do you think Jurgen Klinsmann is looking to get from Joe Corona on this roster?
Well, I predicted that Joe Corona would be on Jurgen's roster, although I wouldn't put him on mine. But the reason why I think Jurgen has chose to put him on the roster is because he's a soccer player, okay? And so in a tight game where maybe you're trying to get a goal, in tight spaces, he's still pretty sharp and clever, and he can either make a little bit of space for himself that can lead to a shot for himself, and he's shown that he can score goals, or he's clever enough to slip a little ball to somebody to help set something up. So I think that's the main reason why he's there, but in the end, I don't think he establishes himself in the camp and goes with the 23.
Well, here's a guy who I think may establish himself. I know you're going to hit me for this one probably, but I think that, and no one would call him a soccer player, but DeAndre Edlin being called in is a super surprise for most people, I think. But what he brings is something that I think Klinsmann just wants to take another long look at. Obviously, he's very, very fast. Obviously, he has the willingness to get forward, is not afraid to play a ball in. He can deliver a decent ball from the flank. His inexperience is the biggest issue. And I think Klinsmann said, what I've seen from you with Seattle, what I've seen from you in the January camp when you were here, I want to see a little bit more and see if there's anything to it.
I think what the surprise is here is that Yedlin was named to the camp along with 5 other potential right back candidates. When you look at Fabian Johnson as a potential candidate to play on the right side, that means there are 6 guys who can play that position. And that means it is very up in the air as far as Klinsmann is concerned, because you don't take that many guys for a spot if you have an idea of the 1 or 2 guys who are going to be playing there.
Yeah, well, he's brought that many in because he's hoping that one guy establishes himself, okay? We talked about Timmy Chandler last time as a possibility. We think Brad Evans is the most steady. For me, Yedlin would still be a big concern because as athletic as he is, as a coach, I would still be worried about his propensity to make mistakes. So I think that that position is really up for grabs, and if anything, it'll make the 30-man roster camp interesting just for that alone.
It gives us some more fodder to talk about. And finally, guys, when you look at this 30-man roster, tell me something about it that you like and maybe something that concerns you on the other side when you first kind of look it over.
Yeah, from a coaching perspective, I look at it and I say, Bradley, Dempsey, Howard are 3 guys that I know I can count on. Their combination of ability, form, experience, and leadership means that you've taken 3 guys to the World Cup that you know have played in these kinds of games and have been successful in these kinds of games.
And they're in the middle of the field, too,
yes,
right up the spine.
And they, you know what, they love to play with each other.
Yep.
Then, when you look at it, my biggest concern is what's going on in the back, all right? And specifically center back. I think that Matt Beasler and Omar Gonzalez have done well together in qualifiers, but when they go to the World Cup, it's another notch above that. And so they don't have the experience together in the best games. So it'll be important in this camp, okay, and the lead up to the World Cup, that in these games that they get to work together, that they get to experience what the games are like, and that they're really ready to go.
Well, one of the things I like about this, and this maybe plays into a little bit the right back position, is the flexibility that he has. Jurgen Klinsmann has options right now. So many of these players that he brought in can play multiple positions. Jeff Cameron can play right back, center back, holding mid. Maurice Adu can play holding mid. He can also play in the center of the defense as well. Fabian Johnson can play just about anywhere on the flanks. You can see Graham Zusi and Landon Donovan flip-flopping all the time in this. So there's lots of flexibility. But what flexibility brings is question marks as well. And the biggest question mark for me, aside from just the right back position and who has that, is the entire right side. Nothing is really solidified out there on who's going to start, and they're going up against some left-sided opponents who are very, very impressive. You look at Portugal, Cristiano Ronaldo. How are you going to stop that? It's impossible for anybody at this point. Ghana, Dede Ayew or Boateng could be coming at you. And Marco Reus for Germany is going to be coming at you. So these are all incredibly strong left sides, and the question marks on the right side have me concerned.
Yeah, and whoever they pick, ultimately it's going to come down to how the group tactically deals with it with numbers, okay? So whoever they choose, whatever happens, they need to make sure that the block of 8 essentially is ironed out, that they're ready to deal with some very, very good attacking players.
So you're going with a 4-4-2.
Right. Yes. Plenty more time to talk about tactics as we move forward. Let us know what your thoughts on the roster are in the comments section below. Who do you think got snubbed? Who are you happy to see there? And what do you think comes next for the U.S. national team as they begin camp? That's all we have for this edition of Brazil Bound, presented by Castrol GTX High Mileage. Stay tuned all week with plenty more on the U.S. national team's road to the World Cup. We'll have updates coming from Palo Alto, as well as another edition from the studio on Thursday.